JRPGs have a reputation for wasting your time. Hours of unnecessary dialogue, endless dungeons, and repetitive content meant to hide how empty the game really is. These 20 are different. They're long because they're packed with the real content, not because they're dragging things out. If you're already into JRPGs or thinking about getting into the genre, stick around until the end, because this list mixes timeless classics, recent releases, and a few hidden gems that most people have probably never heard of. If any of them catch your eye, let me know in the comments which ones you've played or which one you're jumping into first. Dragon Quest XI's starts out like a classic fantasy adventure. A village boy, a coming-of-age ceremony, and a sacred stone. But things quickly turn upside down. You discover you're the reincarnation of a legendary hero, and instead of being welcomed as the world's savior, the king has you arrested as the Darkspawn. From there, you're forced to flee, gathering new companions along the way as the adventure gradually opens up one continent at a time. Every party member has their own personality and backstory, and before you know it, you've become genuinely invested in all of them. The character designs come from Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball, and his signature style shines through in every visual detail. Combat sticks to the classic turn-based formula. It's approachable enough for newcomers, but deep enough for players who enjoy experimenting with different builds. And if you're looking for a real challenge, Draconian Quest lets you customize the difficulty with brutal gameplay modifiers right from the start. This definitive edition also includes one standout feature. You can switch freely between modern 3D visuals and a classic 2D mode inspired by the Super Nintendo era. And it's not just the visual filter. The entire game is fully playable in both styles. Final Fantasy XII has always been the black sheep of the franchise. The combat is different, the pacing is slower, and the protagonist never really clicked with a lot of players at first. Even so, over the years, it became a cult favorite. Plenty of fans rank it among the very best in the series without a second thought. The story throws you into a massive political conflict. An empire has swallowed up a small kingdom, a princess refuses to surrender, and the street kid dreams of escaping it all by taking to the skies. The party you build along the way feels very different from the usual JRPG cast. These characters aren't together by coincidence, and that really comes through in the way the story unfolds. The battle system is probably the game's most divisive feature. You program your party's behavior using the Gambit system, which feels almost like solving logic puzzles inside an RPG. People who love it get completely hooked. People who don't usually say the game plays itself. The Zodiac Age completely reworked the job system, making character progression much more balanced. Final Fantasy X is one of those games people always describe in two phases, before the ending and after the ending, because there's a moment near the end that hits in a way most games never even come close to. The story follows Titus, a star player in a futuristic underwater sport, who suddenly wakes up 1,000 years in the future, in a world terrorized by a colossal creature known as Shin. He joins Yuna, a summoner on what is essentially a suicide pilgrimage to defeat the monster, without fully understanding what that journey is really going to cost. The combat sticks to classic turn-based battles with no time pressure, so you can think through every move. The standout feature is the Sphere Grid, a progression system where you literally choose each character's growth path. If you want to turn your white mage into a tank, you absolutely can. Then there's the soundtrack, which is on another level. Some of these themes will still be stuck in your head years later. And when everything comes together at the end, the story hits on a completely different level. After directing Persona 3, 4, and 5, the creator said he wanted to make something completely different. Metaphor ReFantazio is exactly that, and it makes a huge impression. You play as Will, a young man from the kingdom's most discriminated against race competing in an election to decide who will become the next king. And yes, it's literally an election, complete with campaigning, popularity rankings, and public support, all inside a medieval fantasy RPG. Somehow it works even better than it sounds. The gameplay blends classic turn-based combat with real-time action while exploring. Similar to Persona, but with even more layers. It also introduces the follower system, where you build relationships with people across the kingdom to earn political support. Managing your time becomes a key part of the strategy. What really stands out, though, is the tone. The story tackles prejudice, politics, and fear in a direct way without trying to sugarcoat any of it. Even the monsters are inspired by the disturbing paintings of Hieronymus Bosch. You can tell right away this game is doing something different. Persona 3 is the game that established the formula Persona 5 later took into the mainstream. This reload version is the remake fans had been asking for years, and it arrives exactly the way it should. You play as a student who moves back to his hometown years after losing his parents in an accident. Soon, you discover there's a hidden hour between midnight and the next day, where monsters appear and ordinary people fall unconscious inside flesh-like coffins. Pretty dark for a game that's also a school life simulator. That contrast is exactly what makes Persona work. By day, you go to class, build friendships, and manage your time. By night, you climb a massive, ever-changing tower full of randomized floors. The two sites feed into each other. The bonds you form during the day become power in battle. Reload brings the combat closer to Persona 5, with the shift system making turns flow more smoothly, fully rebuilt visuals, and plenty of new content in the dorm. The story is still one of the heaviest in the series. In Xenoblade Chronicles X, Earth has been destroyed. What's left of humanity escapes in massive ships through space, and yours crash lands on an alien planet called Mira. You wake up with no memory in the middle of a makeshift city surrounded by creatures you've never seen before. Mira is absurdly huge. It's made up of 5 completely different continents, a bioluminescent forest, a desert filled with ancient ruins, volcanic land controlled by hostile aliens. At first, you explore on foot, taking on missions and uncovering what's hidden in every corner. Then, you eventually unlock the Skell, a giant mech you can pilot across the world. The first time you take off in one of those, speeding across open fields while electronic music kicks in, is hard to put into words. The combat mixes automatic attacks with abilities you trigger at the right moment. There's plenty of depth for build optimization, but it's still enjoyable if you don't want to dig too deep into systems. It's a JRPG that feels different from almost everything else in the genre. Scale, atmosphere, freedom, all taken to another level. If you've always liked the Monster Hunter universe but never got into it because of the fast-paced hunting gameplay, Stories is the missing entry point. In Monster Hunter Stories 3, you don't hunt monsters, you form bonds with them. The story begins with 2 kingdoms on the brink of collapse. A mysterious crystal is consuming the natural world. Monsters are disappearing, and in the middle of it all, something unexpected appears. A Rathalos egg, from a species thought to be extinct. From that egg, twins are born, marked by a connection to a civil war that happened 200 years ago. And with that, tensions between the kingdoms flare up once again. Combat is turn-based, with an interesting strategic layer. Each monster has a preferred attack type, and choosing the right counter at the right moment makes a real difference in battle. Your monster companions evolve, learn new abilities, and your collection grows naturally as you explore. It's the kind of JRPG that goes deep on story without overcomplicating the gameplay. Easy to get into, hard to put down. Soccer with absurd special moves, charismatic characters, and that shonen anime energy that used to keep people glued to the screen. Inazuma 11 is back with Inazuma 11 Victory Road, and after nearly 10 years of delays, it finally arrives the way it was meant to. You play as Unmei, a kid who isn't great at soccer himself, but has a talent for building teams and reading players. So instead of being the star striker, you're the coach and scout, recruiting players, setting strategies, and building a brand new team from scratch at a school in Nagasaki. The end goal is to take on the legendary Raymond team from the original series, set 25 years earlier. Matches blend RPG mechanics with actual soccer gameplay. You position players, choose plays, and trigger special moves at the right moment. Team progression happens naturally as the story moves forward. For people who grew up with the anime, it's pure nostalgia, with substance. For newcomers, it's an honest entry point into a genre that doesn't really have many rivals. In Shin Megami Tensei Devil Survivor 2, you download an app on your phone that shows the death of people close to you. Then, the train you are about to board derails. And suddenly, Japan starts being destroyed by celestial beings no one knows how to stop. All within the next 7 days. It's a tactical RPG where you move squads across a map and fight turn-based battles. The Demon Fusion system from Atlas returns. You capture, fuse, and create new creatures with combined abilities. There's plenty of depth for build optimization, but the story pulls you in even if you don't dive deep into systems. What really holds it together is the choice system. Every decision affects who survives, which faction you support, and which of the multiple endings you reach. Some party members can die permanently depending on what you do, and it hits hard because the game actually takes time to make you care about them. 7 days, the end of the world, and choices that matter. It's hard not to want to see how it all ends. Chrono Trigger is the result of 3 legends working together: the creator of Dragon Quest, the creator of Dragon Ball, and the Final Fantasy team. Back in 1995, that collaboration produced what many still call the greatest RPG ever made, and it's not an exaggeration. It starts simple: a medieval fair, a boy named Chrono, and a girl who accidentally falls through a time portal. Then, everything explodes. You travel through prehistory, the Middle Ages, a post-apocalyptic future, and even the end of time itself. Every era has its own mysteries, all connecting in ways that still feel impressive today. Combat uses the active time battle system, where time keeps moving and enemy positioning matters. The standout feature is the tech combo system, 2 or 3 characters combining abilities to create unique attacks. There are over 50 possible combinations, and discovering them mid-fight always feels rewarding. There are 13 different endings. You can even fight the final boss right at the beginning of the game if you really want to. Chrono Trigger respects your time because it never wastes a second of it. Yakuza Like a Dragon starts with Ichiban Kasuga, a low-ranking Yakuza member who spends 18 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. When he finally gets out, he expects to find the people who promised to stand by him, but there's no one left. The clan has been destroyed by the very man he respected most. The game makes a bold shift for the series, moving away from real-time combat into turn-based RPG battles, and it works surprisingly well. The job system lets characters switch into completely different roles, from bodyguard to musician, each one changing how they fight. Battles turn into controlled chaos where you're throwing bicycles, umbrellas, and street signs as weapons. What really sets it apart is the cast. Ichiban teams up with a disgraced ex-cop, a homeless former nurse, and a hostess on a personal mission. These are people society has discarded, trying to become heroes in their own way. That emotional core is what drives the entire experience. Outside the main story, Yokohama is packed with Sega arcades, kart racing, and dozens of sub-stories. There's always something waiting around the corner. Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth brings together 2 of the franchise's most iconic characters in a story that holds nothing back. Ichiban Kasuga, the underdog who keeps rising from nothing, and Kazuma Kiryu, the legendary dragon of Dojima. Except this time, Kiryu is facing the final months of his life. That contrast between them becomes the emotional heart of the game. The journey spans the Pacific Ocean, from Japan to Hawaii. And Hawaii isn't just a backdrop, it's a massive living map filled with activity, carrying the series' usual chaos but on an even bigger scale. Combat builds on the previous game's system. It's still turn-based, but now you can move around the battlefield, use the environment as a weapon, and the job system returns even more absurd and creative than before. Building the right party for each situation becomes a game within the game. It's one of the most emotional stories in the franchise. Players who went through the previous entry will feel the weight of every Kiryu scene. Newcomers will quickly understand why this series has such a loyal fanbase. Live Alive is a 1994 game that stayed exclusive to Japan for nearly 30 years, and this remake finally brought it to the rest of the world. And it's easy to see why it was so remembered. The concept is unlike anything else. 7 completely separate chapters, each set in a different time period. You play as a ninja in feudal Japan, a wandering outlaw in the Wild West, a kung fu master choosing a successor, a robot drifting through deep space.
Each chapter has its own visual style, pacing, and gameplay approach, and you can play them in any order you want. What seems like a collection of unrelated stories gradually connects in ways few games of that era ever attempted. The 8th chapter completely changes your understanding of everything that came before it. Combat is tactical, played on a 7x7 grid with no MP system. Each character has a fixed set of abilities. It's simple to learn, but has enough depth to stay engaging throughout. The soundtrack by Yoko Shimomura, fully remastered here, is a highlight on its own.
Chained Echoes was made by a single person, an indie developer who spent years building a love letter to Super Nintendo-era JRPGs, and ended up delivering one of the best games in the genre in recent years, no exaggeration. The story takes place in Valandes, a continent recovering from a war between 3 kingdoms. The party you control keeps growing, with each character carrying their own baggage, and the narrative isn't afraid to go to heavy places. There's betrayal, reincarnation, and guilt carried across lifetimes. The cast is large, but everyone feels distinct. Combat is turn-based with an interesting twist. An overdrive meter you have to keep in the green zone. If you push it too far, your party starts taking increased damage, so you constantly alternate between going all out and using support skills to cool things down. It creates a rhythm that keeps battles active and engaging. Gorgeous pixel art, a soundtrack inspired by classic PlayStation-era RPGs, and 0 random encounters. Exactly the kind of JRPG that respects your time.
Bravely Default 2 looks like a classic JRPG on the surface. 4 heroes of light, elemental crystals, and a world in danger. But it hides a combat system that completely changes how you think about turns. The Brave and Default system is simple to understand, but hard to master. You can use Default to store turns and build BP, then spend it all at once with Brave to act up to 4 times in a single character's turn. The risk is that if you overextend, you'll be left unable to act for multiple turns, leaving yourself wide open. Every battle becomes a calculated gamble between offense and patience. Jobs act as classes you unlock throughout the journey, each with its own abilities. Mixing passive skills from different jobs is where the system really opens up. You can build combinations that completely change how battles play out. The story follows Seth, Gloria, Elvis, and Adele in a new world with no direct ties to previous entries, making it a solid entry point for newcomers. The game also plays with ideas around endings and saving in ways that are better experienced without spoilers.
Radiant Historia is one of the most underrated JRPGs out there. Released on the DS back in 2010, it flew under the radar for many players, but those who played it kept talking about it for years. You control Stock, a spy who receives a book called The White Chronicle that allows him to travel between timelines. This isn't just a narrative gimmick, it's the core of the entire game. You constantly jump between different branches of time, using knowledge and items from one timeline to solve problems in another. Situations that seem impossible in one route often only make sense once you've seen another. Combat takes place on a 3x3 grid where positioning matters a lot. You can push enemies around, group them together, and hit multiple targets at once. Manipulating turn order is also part of the strategy, making the system more dynamic than it first appears. The story dives deep into betrayal, sacrifice, and fate, with one of the most well-executed twists in the genre. Perfect Chronology also adds a new timeline with additional content. It's absolutely worth playing.
Ni no Kuni: Wrath of the White Witch starts with one of the saddest premises in JRPGs. A boy loses his mother in an accident and discovers there's a parallel world where she might still be saved. It's that simple, and it works so well because the game never lets you forget the weight of it. What makes it truly special is the collaboration behind it. The animation is done by Studio Ghibli, and it's not just Ghibli inspired, it's the real deal, with cutscenes drawn by the studio itself. The soundtrack is composed by Joe Hisashi, the same composer behind My Neighbor Totoro and Spirited Away. Visually and sonically, it's one of the most beautiful RPGs ever made. The combat blends real-time action with tactical elements. You switch between Oliver and his familiars, creatures you capture and evolve throughout the journey, each with their own abilities. There's enough depth to stay engaging without becoming overly complex.
It's a game that works for all ages, but it hits especially hard for anyone who grew up watching Ghibli films. The story may be short in some stretches, but the moments that matter stay with you.
Golden Sun is one of those Game Boy Advance RPGs that people who grew up with never forgot, and anyone who discovers it later quickly understands why. The story begins with Isaac losing his father in a natural disaster, and 3 years later finding himself caught in a conspiracy that could bring alchemy back into the world, a forbidden force that some will do anything to restore, even taking the protagonist's friends hostage. The game doesn't waste time explaining everything up front. It throws you straight into the adventure. The Synergy system is what sets it apart. Each character is an adept aligned with an element, earth, fire, water, or wind, and uses those powers both in battle and to solve puzzles in the world. Freezing pillars, moving objects, revealing hidden paths. The dungeons are built around these abilities, and the puzzle design is still impressive to date. Jin, elemental creatures you collect and equip, add another layer of customization to your builds. Simple to understand, but surprisingly deep to master. A classic that deserved far more attention.
Golden Sun: The Lost Age does something rare. It puts you in control of the antagonist from the previous game. Felix was the villain, or at least that's how it seemed. Here, you discover the story had another side all along. While the first game is more linear and contained, The Lost Age opens up the world of Wayard in full. You sail across a massive ocean on a magical ship, exploring islands and continents in a more free-form structure. The sense of discovery is constant. There's hidden content you can only access later with Synergy abilities you unlock much further into the game, encouraging you to revisit earlier areas. The puzzles evolve significantly. Spells like Frost, which turn water puddles into ice pillars, work both in combat and exploration. That integration between battle and puzzle design is surprisingly elegant for a 2003 game. The Jin system returns in a more robust form, with new elementals to collect and combine. And both games connect directly. You can transfer data from the first into the second and unlock exclusive content. It's a sequel that expands everything without losing what made the original work.
Tales of Vesperia takes place in a world where all of civilization depends on a technology called Blastia. It powers spells, supplies cities, and creates the barriers that protect people from the monsters outside. When a crucial component is stolen and an entire district suddenly loses its water supply, Yuri Lowell goes after the thief. It ends with him getting arrested inside an imperial castle. Yuri is a former soldier, cynical, someone who follows his own code and makes decisions most JRPG protagonists would never consider. During his escape from the castle, he meets Estelise, a noblewoman searching for a friend. Alongside his loyal dog Rapide, the three of them set out beyond the capital's protective barriers for the first time. The party keeps expanding. A monster hunter dealing with his own insecurities, an eccentric Blastia researcher obsessed with Estelise's power, a mysterious guild member. Each character arrives with their own story and gradually builds bonds with the group through skits, optional conversations that are the heart of the series. Combat is real-time, tactical, and becomes increasingly expressive as new mechanics are introduced. This definitive edition brings together everything that was previously Japan exclusive for years. A fitting conclusion to the list.
If this video helped you discover something new, leave a like and subscribe. See you next time!